Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the program. So we're at the halfway point of the show, which means it's time for our first discussion of the day, and you may see the sign behind us right here. We're going to talk about ADHD. Now, I don't know if you're aware, the greatest basketball in the world, Michael Jordan, actually does have ADHD. In fact, several other international stars, such as Emma Watson, also has ADHD. So what do you know about ADHD?
No, I know nothing about ADHD, so I'm gonna try to learn more about this attention deficit hyperactivity disorder.
Correct.
So it is some kind of relating to concentration, right?
Seems to be, because attention deficit would be the lack of concentration, but many are unable to differentiate between ADHD and what we know as autism, especially in children, because a lot of these symptoms tend to overlap at a young age as well. Therefore, joining us this morning is clinical psychologist from Personal Growth, Shierlen Octavia, who's going to talk to us more about ADHD, especially in children. Good morning. Thank you for being here with us.
Hi, good morning.
Hello.
So I'm going to start off by actually showing you. I just did a quick ADHD test online.
Oh, okay.
Just wondering. This is obviously a very general test, but it says that I am ADHD-C. It's a type of ADHD.
Yes.
But again, this is just from just general questions. It's not very in-depth. And it says that the level is between, out of 65, it's a 38 down here on the chart.
Out of 65.
And there's a word severe beside it. I don't know what that means, but let's try to find out.
Okay.
So let's start off by talking about what is ADHD and how does one develop it? Is it already happened from birth?
Okay, so attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or in short ADHD, is one of the most common neurodevelopmental disorders often found in childhood. So by neurodevelopmental, we refer to the conditions in which someone's brain growth and also development is impacted, and it also affects their functioning in language, emotion, and also behavior. So yeah, it is a birth condition. Someone is born with certain conditions, yeah, for example, like ADHD, and it usually typically can be diagnosed as early as 3 or 4 years of age.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So what causes this abnormality in the brain function?
Okay, so up to now, research has not yet found one definite cause, but it is most probably hereditary.
Oh,
But yeah.
Makes perfect sense.
yeah. we
In
talked
my
about
life,
this
anyway.
before,
Yeah.
before the show.
Yeah.
But there are also some causative factors that is environmental. For example, exposure to harmful chemicals when
What?
Really?
What
Yes.
sort of chemicals?
lead and also mercury.
Oh.
Yes, during pregnancy.
Oh,
So
I
in the mother.
see.
Yes, in the mother. And then pollution, yeah. Usage of substance abuse or alcohol consumptions also,
Okay.
yeah, can be
Doesn't it?
the risk factors.
Okay, so so we talk about brain development, right? Why is that associated with hyperactivity? Because I see it, I think I mentioned it a few times on this program before. We have a 3-year-old son that we're not sure, but he exhibits some signs of ADHD. And it's basically, the way I describe it is, it's not that there's anything less in his brain, but it's just perhaps the way he communicates, the way he does his activities. It's just different than what a regular developing child. So what does this actually have to do? How do they interact, being hyperactive and not being able to concentrate? Is it because they're hyperactive that they just want to do so many different things at once? How does that actually work? How is the brain wired?
Okay, so in ADHD, there are actually many symptoms that can vary for each individual, but there is a similar ongoing pattern for someone with ADHD. 3 following symptoms. The first one is the inattentive.
Okay.
Yeah, the inattention, which means that some kids may have difficulties in sustaining their focus, their concentration. And the second one is the hyperactivity. So they might have much more energy than most of their kids around their age. And the last one is the impulsivity. So they often act without thinking.
Oh,
yes, and have trouble with self-control.
Okay.
Oh,
Yes.
I see.
How about lack of consequence? Like a lack of being aware of consequences of something?
They actually can learn about consequences, but due to the impulsivity, it is quite difficult for them to control their impulsive thoughts and also to, just blurt out everything that is happening in their brains, yeah, in their mind.
Okay, so as a parent, how do you know that your child is suffering from this condition? Because we know that when we speak about lack of concentration, lack of focus, nowadays with this digitalization, it's common in kids. How do you know that he's suffering from this condition?
Yeah, it's actually quite tricky because many symptoms of ADHD are also similar with any other mental health conditions such as autism.
Right.
Yeah, just like what Paul has mentioned before. And also other conditions such as learning disabilities, yeah, and also like sensory problems. So it is important to like take notes during observation for your children. But the most important thing is to like having a thorough assessment and evaluation. Yes, because there are certain aspects that can only be seen through assessments, formal assessments.
You mentioned about some of the sensory skills. Can you talk more about this? How do we know, if it's
what
there?
to observe? Yeah.
Okay. So maybe the utmost and also observable signs is like their difficulty to sit still, yes, and also fidgeting. With tapping hands or feet. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So we know autism, there's a spectrum.
Yes.
Is there a spectrum for ADHD as well when it comes to severity? Because obviously with this test, it shows there's a severity scale.
Yeah, there are not necessarily severity or a spectrum because, but there are some types. So the first one, that is the C type. And also, there are also any other types like the prominent symptoms which can be more prominent in hyperactivity or impulsivity. Yeah.
Okay, so some symptoms can be stronger than others.
Yes.
Mine says ADHD-C is the most common subtype, which combines symptoms of both inattention and hyperactivity or impulsivity. It can struggle with anything between difficulty in focusing, restlessness, forgetfulness, interrupting others while they're talking, and acting without thinking, which could experience then academic or work problems, even social situations or relationships as well. So again, it's hard to identify when they're too young, especially because a lot of, and I have to ask you this as well, is this more common in a particular gender, like boys as opposed to girls? Do you know that?
Not really,
No.
but not really. But maybe most cases that are more prominent is in boys.
Okay.
Yeah, but not necessarily different, not significantly different.
Right. So what's the best way to handle it if we see a child that's exhibiting some signs, but again, there's a stigma. The reason I ask because there's a stigma when it comes to boys that people say, oh, he's not talking yet. Oh, he can't sit still. It's just because he's a boy.
It's okay.
Yeah, and it's an old-fashioned way of thinking, right? And I sometimes think because of that, a lot of these cases gets undiagnosed because people would just think, oh, it's fine. They're just hyperactive because they're boys. So what's the best way for us to handle it? Apart, I mean, obviously to go and get a proper evaluation, but us at home in order to deal with some of these symptoms.
Yes, because it can be quite challenging, especially for parents that have to deal with their kids, of course, every day. So the best way to support someone with mental health condition is, of course, only two ways. The first one is to be patient, of course. By being patient, we refer to prioritize effective communication. So try to listen to our kids without judgment, of course, and also encourage them to be out loud thinking. So instead of like not talking with their parents, encourage them to just say whatever comes in their mind.
Express themselves.
Express themselves, yes, in whatever ways, of course, like in art or maybe, to verbalize. It's very recommended, for them to try many things to communicate, of course, and then for us to express positive body language whenever talking with them, such as leaning forward to them.
Oh, okay.
Yes, and also show like our interest in our gestures when talking with them.
Okay.
Yes, and also by encouraging them. By encouraging, we mean by like encouraging their strength instead of focusing on their challenges.
Oh, I get
taking
what you're saying.
taking notes of whatever they have. So, for example, if you notice that kids with ADHD who is very artistic, you can like say and appreciate their creativity and also their hard work instead of like mentioning their difficulties.
weaknesses.
Yeah, their weaknesses.
Because that's a problem with the parents try. We always try to fix things. We always try to
Yeah.
make things better. Oh, you're doing this wrong. Well, you have to work on that. And that's usually not the
Exactly.
proper approach.
Yeah.
And I've also heard that when it comes to autism, a friend taught me that nutrition is important. There's certain
Yeah.
foods to avoid.
wanna know
And
about
what about ADHD? Is there certain foods that can kind of trigger like sugar?
Sugar,
for example,
maybe.
right? Yeah.
Oh,
that would be, right?
okay.
Because that has to do with their hyperactivity, doesn't it?
Yeah. Oh, we can. There is no like strict dietary for ADHD, but of course, having like nutritious meal, and there is no like restriction to any other foods for ADHD. Yeah.
Now, I also want to know, because we talk about ADHD in kids. What happened to adults that have ADHD but undiagnosed maybe when they were kids, but
Okay.
they're functioning well now?
Yes.
So what happens to them? Do they still have this sort of symptoms going on
Okay.
in their daily activities?
Yeah. So there are actually many adults who like grow into adulthood without noticing that they have ADHD. The first one is because they probably had a mild form of ADHD. Yeah, so it is not really noticeable. And the second one is maybe they can manage it fairly well during childhood until like they have to face the demands of adulthood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And usually the symptoms of hyperactivity are lessening in
Okay.
adulthood, and it can express themselves. The symptoms can express themselves differently. For example, like the hyperactivity, once when they are still in their childhood, it might appear as like running or climbing in inappropriate situation. But in adulthood, they may appear like careless person
Oh,
or
yeah.
restless.
Like accident prone, we say
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm always bumping into things. or,
Yeah,
dropping
exactly.
What?
Starting to let's get some clarity there a little bit. So why is it important, let's say, going off of what Shanaz just said, why is it important for an adult to get themselves diagnosed then? If they're a fully functional adult, why is it still important for them to still be aware that, hey, maybe I do have ADHD, and how would that change their lives to know?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so for the first one, it deals with their like daily activities, of course.
Okay.
Because if it left untreated, they might have to face more challenges, such as difficulties like to sustain their attention in work or being productive at work.
Okay, without realizing they're just being less productive, right?
Exactly. And the second one is because of right now the main causes that is found in research is more hereditary. So it is very important because we have to discuss it with our spouses, of course. Yeah. Because there is like probability to have kids with ADHD problem in the future.
I see. So what are the treatments that we can get, as an adult with ADHD?
Okay, so of course the ideal one is the combination of medications and also therapies. So by medication, you can go to psychiatrist, and by therapies, you can go to like clinical psychologists. I speak as a clinical psychologist, of course, here. So in the psychological counseling and psychotherapies, we usually use cognitive behavioral therapy approach, which tries to like modify behavior so they can manage their symptoms pretty well.
Okay. So there's also a thing called ADD. What's the difference between ADHD and ADD?
Okay.
Apart from that, is it just the person taking the hyperactivity out of it?
Yes, it's actually, the difference is only in the hyperactivity symptoms.
Okay.
Yes, so they develop more like difficulties in attention.
Okay, so it's strictly more for the focus
Yes,
part
in
of
the
it.
focus.
I see. All right. So my last question would be, can we prevent this condition from happening to our kids? If we have one, we don't inherit it to our kids.
Okay, so it is also quite difficult to answer because yeah, it is a birth condition. So what we can do is to make sure that we promote maternal health. So yeah, before pregnancy, we make sure to keep our body healthy, and yeah,
More like lowering the risk.
lowering the risk. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, very good too. Oh, by the way, when you say get yourself evaluated, what does that involve? So if somebody comes to you for an evaluation, how long does it take and what is it that you usually do? Do you ask a series of questions?
Oh, okay. So yeah, of course we have to. We have to like go through a structured diagnostic interview.
Okay.
And the second one is like to have performance tests because we have to examine factors that might contribute to the ADHD. For example, like the working memory function, their emotional control. Yeah.
And if you test like a kid, but also with their parents, is it separate evaluations then?
Yeah.
For both of them?
It would be separated.
Okay. Asking for a friend.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. I'm actually interested myself because doing these self-tests, they're very general.
Yeah.
I find they're not specific enough. Some of the answers I want to answer
Yeah.
as well. So.
You need to get yourself tested.
I would love to get myself tested. Anyway, good to have you here in the
Thank
studio.
you.
Yeah,
thank
thank
you for
you so
talking about this
much.
topic that I think more and more people need to be aware of.
Yeah, of
I
course.
think back in the day, we didn't
Exactly.
focus on these
Yeah.
sorts of things, and people just learned to cope throughout their lives. And nowadays, we can cope with it better.
Yeah, it's a privilege of living in the modern days,
Absolutely.
right? Okay, now we are up for another short break, but in the meantime, don't forget to follow our socials. If you haven't already, we're on Instagram, X, and YouTube at C Today News. Stay tuned. Thank you.
Thank you.
So much.